I'm Ian Hannamansing live in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. We are tracking the monstrous tornado that slammed into Moore, Oklahoma just under 3 hours ago. It is just past 6 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. local time in Oklahoma. This tornado hitting at around 3:15 in the afternoon. And keep in mind, this was not a holiday in Oklahoma. It was a regular work day and more ominously a school day. And one of the areas devastated is in fact a school where latest reports are children were being pulled from the debris. Our Sarah Galashan is live in our newsroom. And Sarah, what's the latest on this story?
Well, Ian, the latest that we are hearing right now from the two local hospitals nearest to this community of Moore, Oklahoma, is that 29 people have been injured and taken to the two hospitals, 7 of them in critical condition. And at this point, we have no confirmation on any deaths at this point. A lot of focus, as you say, is on this area that you're looking at right now. These are recent pictures of the Plaza Towers Elementary School in Moore, Oklahoma, and a very active search and rescue operation underway right now. Early on, after this tornado had touched down, it became quite clear to people who were on the ground that there were children trapped inside. And so the rescue efforts became quite intense, and they continue. And this is the bulk of the feed that we are seeing coming out of Moore. Of course, the area around that elementary school is also absolutely devastated. Homes completely wiped out, and it is believed that there are people trapped in the wreckage of those homes as well, and some people going to those areas and unable to find their home. That's the level to which it has been completely taken away, that home. Now, we have heard that children have been pulled out of the wreckage alive at that Plaza Towers Elementary School. There is another elementary school, Briarwood Elementary, but as I say, the main media pictures that we are seeing, the live feeds, do appear to be the Plaza Towers, and that is where the search is quite intensive. Before the tornado struck, we know that there were a number of children that were able to be evacuated from that particular elementary school. Grades 6, 5, and 4, it appears, were taken to a local nearby church, but children under those grades, certainly grade 3 was one that was being reported quite a lot by the local reporters who are on the ground, that there were a number of grade 3 students who may be still trapped inside. The number has been as high as 75, but really these are such preliminary reports. It's very difficult to know exactly the numbers that they are looking for within that particular structure. But as you can see in the wide shots of that area, the area really is devastated all around that elementary school. And I think there is searching going on all around the area. It is just particularly intensive at that Plaza Towers Elementary, Ian.
Well, as you look at those pictures from the helicopter, Sarah, it really does tell the story. The U.S. National Weather Service reporting that the winds here up to 320 kilometers an hour. And although people here had a warning of a half hour or so that there was a tornado on the way, they were limited in terms of where they could go. Some had shelters that they could go to in the buildings that they were in. But as you can see, a shelter isn't necessarily going to be protection from this kind of damage, these kinds of winds. They are used to tornadoes, of course, in the state of Oklahoma and Kansas and Texas. Those 3 places in the United States hit quite often by deadly, powerful tornadoes. But this one is so great that we were hearing local reporters, Sarah, in their live coverage saying that many of them had not seen anything like this. Although, as recently as 1999, this very neighborhood, or area anyway, of Moore, Oklahoma, was struck by an equally devastating tornado. But still, many people in the area saying they had never seen anything quite like this. And as you mentioned, as we speak right now, 4 minutes after 6 o'clock local time, rescuers still desperately trying to, first of all, identify where people are, because that's not clear either. Power's out in a lot of these places. There have been some gas fires as well to complicate things. Identifying where people are and then beginning the task of trying to get them out. Now, Sarah, one of the things you were looking at, I guess, is the chances of survival when a big storm like this makes its way through an area.
Well, As you say, they did have a little bit of a warning, the people who live in that area. But what do you do? And particularly, is there anywhere to go? And this part of Oklahoma, we've been listening to reports from senators who've been calling into various American media outlets talking about the ability to go underground. And there really isn't an ability in many of these homes to go underground, at least not into a basement situation as we might imagine, perhaps here in Canada, because the base on which these homes are built is so strong. It's almost like a rock base. You have to literally blast into it in order to create any kind of basement situation or an underground safe room. Now, some of the homes would have that, and they are oftentimes located in the garage under where you would park your car. Literally, the construction crews have blasted in an area, constructed it, and that's where you can go if you are inside that home in order to seek shelter. Other homes would have what they would call a concrete safe room within inside the structure of their home. So that is also a possibility for people who would have gotten that warning, had been in their home, a place for them to try and seek shelter. We have also heard that from those who are familiar with that school area, that students would have been hugging or holding themselves close to concrete walls that are within that school. That they've obviously had these tornado drills. As you say, this is a community that has been hit in the past by tornadoes. This is something that they do prepare for. When you talk about the strength of the winds that they've experienced, the strength of this particular tornado, that 300 kilometers per hour force of wind, that is, I believe, classified to be the level 4 tornado. And we will, of course, hear more about what kind of damage that can do. But based on what the National Weather Forecast Service is seeing on the ground in this community, this mostly suburb area just outside of Oklahoma City, the damage that they are seeing leads them to believe that they are seeing a level 4 tornado, Ian.
What we're going to do over the next couple of hours is, of course, keep you up to date on what is happening in Oklahoma. There also are weather reports of severe weather in this area, and we'll continue to update the rescue efforts and the latest, especially from that school. But let's bring in one of our CBC meteorologists, Claire Martin, who has been watching this for us. Claire, in Toronto. And Claire, what can you tell us about this particular storm system?
Well, it's definitely not over yet, Ian. The storm line itself is going to continue to move on through parts of the central United States. In fact, this is the latest watch and warning area that I've got out for you. And you can see that the storm is extending all the way from northern Texas all the way into parts of Missouri and Oklahoma. This is a very large system. On radar, boy, it looks awfully skinny, doesn't it? But if you think about how much energy is associated with this line, the skinnier the line, the more destructive it is in a smaller area. So these were incredibly powerful lines that made their way through parts of the central United States. Okay, I'm going to do something a little different here. I'm going to drop into the radar and show you the three-dimensional profile. Why? Because it shows you how deep and how strong these cores are. These are cores of rain, of hail, and sometimes even of tornadoes. And you can still see them lingering in through parts of the central United States, and they will continue to do so as we go through the evening. Broadening out the view just a little bit, you'll see that the stronger storms right now are actually in through portions of northern Texas and then building their way up towards St. Louis. St. Louis has now been issued a tornado watch. They've got a very strong storm. This little guy here, see how it looks like a ball bearing in advance of the front itself? That is now expected to make its way up towards the St. Louis area. Equally potentially damaging is the one that we saw just skip south of Oklahoma City. And I do also want to quickly mention, Sarah Galashan was talking about the strength of these storms. We've actually switched the way we define storms now. We use what's called an enhanced Fujita scale, and that's because building codes have improved significantly in the past 30 years, and we don't tend to see the destruction associated with the same number prior. So when we talk about an EF3 or an EF4 now, in some sense, they are even stronger than those tornadoes that we used to classify as a 3 or 4. As she mentioned, that means wind gusts in excess of 320 to 325 kilometers an hour. Bear in mind, a hurricane wind gust is around 160. It's hard to breathe in winds that are in excess of 160 kilometers an hour. So as this thing tore its way through the suburbs just south of Oklahoma City, people were, as Sarah mentioned, quite literally clinging hold of structure and would have felt quite difficult to breathe in winds like that. We'll continue to watch the line as it makes its way through the central United States. Would you believe the northern end of the line now making its way through upstate Michigan, expected to kick off storms in through parts of southern Ontario. We don't expect to see anything like we've seen in the United States in through southern Ontario, but it just shows you the spatial extent of this line from northern Texas all the way potentially up through towards southern Ontario, and it's not going to die out soon, Ian. We expect to see these storms, as I say, linger for at least through the overnight period, and I do expect to see that one that's making its way up towards St. Louis become particularly nasty because it's in warm, open air. There's nothing else to pull it down, so to speak. I'll follow these through the evening with you. Ian?
Yeah, Claire, thank you very much, and don't go too far away because we will come back to you a little bit later on. One of the things I do want to ask you about later is the extent of the unsettled weather closer to the Canada-U.S. border around Michigan and Ontario. So we'll come back to you on that. Claire Martin reporting live from our Weather Centre in Toronto.